Everyone, I hope you're working on your Cold War test that I uploaded yesterday, as well as your World War One test. So today, what we're going to do is start a brand new section, and this will be American society in the 1950s. And kind of think of the 1950s as kind of like, look here, you got your cars with these huge fins, bright colors, TVs first coming out, records, rock and roll type of music, things like that. It is a time of Americans coming home, trying to find some kind of normalcy, trying to get back to normal life. We got this famous, iconic picture of this sailor who's gotten home, walks down the road, finds a random woman, and they just start making out. And that's what America was trying to get back to, trying to get back to, that time of peace. And it must have been a good kiss because you always hear about how the woman always raises her heel on a good kiss. The GI Bill. We've already kind of covered this a lot, so I'm not going to go too much in it. It just provided benefits for education, unemployment, low cost homes, as well as low cost business loans. And this is really going to transition and help a lot of Americans get back to that normalcy of coming home, trying to get the economy stimulated, and it will spur a huge growth in the 1950s and then even the 1940s, late 1940s economy. Now, if you look up here, we got what we're going to call the Rust Belt. And they're going to call that the Rust Belt because you have all these old aging factories starting to become non-productive anymore. And in the South, well, the South is actually becoming a very livable area. The reason is because a lot of people are saying, hey, let's move to the South. They got more land, we can get more businesses growing there, but there has to be some type of technology that comes out to make this possible. And we all live in the South. We know that summers can be brutal. Temperatures can be anywhere between 90 to 100 on an average day. And even in the winter, it can get sometimes still hot. And so that invention, if you guessed it right, is the air conditioning. The air conditioner is going to allow a lot of people to pack up their things, a lot of businesses as well, and just move to the South. I grew up in a time where we had tons of businesses and tons of factories here in the South. They have all kind of packed up through NAFTA and left for countries like Mexico or China or somewhere else. Now, this was a huge growth for the South during this period. And like I said, make sure that we know that the Rust Belt is known as the North because a lot of people are leaving this area. Um, Also, the South during this period is going to be known as the Bible Belt. Still is today. The people in the southern states, uh, particularly in this area where my mouse is going over, really high on tradition, values, things like that. What we have here is nothing more than just in a store, kind of like your Belks or your JCPenney, your Marshalls, whatever the case may be. A lot of people are trying to figure out, okay, how can I spend my money? And that's a good thing. It always gets the economy going. And a lot of people are going out there to buy consumer goods, as you can see here, things that they did not have during World War II, even the Great Depression. See, a lot of your shoppers are women. You got some guys on the floor. They're probably there, you know, with their wives, or either they're working in the store as some kind of a manager or whatever the case may be. Now, this spurs a huge economic boom during the 1950s and through the 1970s. And you see a lot of department stores opening up. Now, today, things have changed. You go into a department store, you don't really see it happening like this anymore. Most people, they want something, they get on their cell phone, they get online, and they just order it. And next thing you know, it's shipped to their door. It's so much more convenient. And what we're going through right now with COVID-19, it's a lot safer. So you're going to see the national income start to double each decade, and that's always a good thing. But remember, with the income doubling, so will inflation. So that's why you might be able to go buy that dress back then for 50 cents. Today, that dress is going to cost you a lot more. So let's talk about politics of the era during the 1950s. The 1948 election was the last election in which the Democrats wound up winning. And as you can see here, the popular vote is going to be fairly close, but the electoral vote was a landslide for our president, Harry Truman. But the tables turned by the year of 1952. People do not trust the Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party still holds major areas in the South, West Virginia, Kentucky, but for the most part, they're done. For a while, anyways. And Ike, your guy right here, is going to be the guy that's going to be in charge. Now, before we get to that, we need to talk about Truman's Fair Deal. Truman wanted to build upon what his president before him, which was FDR, established as a New Deal. And even TR is saying we get a square deal. And so he's going to come out with his own idea of social improvement. And he wants to continue this through minimum wage. So he gets that set. That is a good thing. You know, we go to work. If we can't be undercut below a certain dollar amount, unless we're working for money underneath the table. He's also going to increase a lot of rights for African Americans. We had an assignment last week, his views on how he thought African Americans should be treated. He thought that they should be treated as an equal person because the Constitution says that everybody should be treated equally. He did things like desegregate the Army. He wanted to go a lot further, but the Democratic Party resisted him in so many ways because they were still a very Southern bound unity that still wanted those old ways of the old South and, pretty much desegregation and things like that. Now, he did bring on the idea, he's the first person to say it, we need some kind of a national health insurance. And we have not even tackled that issue until Barack Obama became president. We've had presidents in the past, like Bill Clinton, try it. It failed. And it somehow got through during the Obama administration. A lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings on that. I'd say it's a good idea, but you have to do it the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, it's a bad idea. And the way our current healthcare system is working out, we're seeing a rise in cost between going to the doctor, going to the ER, even with insurance. For me, for example, I mean, that's a lot of money. That's the last thing that a lot of Americans want to do. Whereas some Americans get to go there and it doesn't cost anything. There needs to be some kind of a workaround on that whole big issue right there. I think it's a good idea to have some kind of a national health plan, but at the same time, we've got to be very flexible with it and figure out what's best for every American. And he's going to have a huge success when it comes to the Housing Act of 1949. That's pretty much making sure that Americans are able to get homes and minimum wage. You can see his quote here. He says, every segment of the population and every individual has a right set from his government a fair deal. And he's got a major quote that says the buck stops here. He believed that it was his job to not pass the buck along, not to just say, oh, it's somebody else's fault. He wanted to make sure that things got done his way. Now, no president has served more than 2 terms than FDR. And the reason is because everybody respected George Washington's precedent of saying 2 terms, probably all of you should probably serve. Then FDR comes along and he says, you know what? I don't really trust anybody else to get us out of this depression. I don't trust anybody else to get us out of World War II. And he goes ahead and will serve a maximum of 4 terms. Now, the 22nd Amendment comes along saying we should really limit a president to just 2 terms because if they're in there any longer than that, they may have too much power. So the 22nd Amendment comes in 1951. It says a president can only serve 2 terms, 10 years maximum, and that's it. And this is a very conservative move. And that's because the Democrats had controlled the presidency for 17 years underneath just 2 presidents, FDR and Truman. And so we see the election in 1952. Truman decides that he will not run. He would not be affected by that. He was at that point in time of being president. And so he's going to let someone else take a shot at it. Now, Eisenhower, as we can see here, wins in 1952 by a large amount. We've already kind of covered that before. He's the first Republican president since the Great Depression. And you can see here, this was a very famous campaign. Let's clean house with Ike and Dick. Now, Dick is short for Richard, which it was Richard Nixon. He will later on become president after he loses in the 1960 election. And so let's talk about Ike. Ike really wants a policy of trying to conserve things, but he's going to do it in a different way. He's going to make sure that Social Security and minimum wage are enforced. And so the Republicans are kind of looking at this like, this is kind of weird. But he thought it would be very necessary. And he's also going to create a Department of Health and Education and Welfare. That's in 1953. That will be built on even further by a Democratic president, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Another 2 areas in which the Republicans were kind of concerned with was that he was taking away farm subsidy. And the farmers were like, hey man, I thought you were for us. But he was trying to balance that budget. And then the last one was that he started to realize that the defense spending needed to be scaled back. He warned JFK about this. He said that we are spending too much money in private companies as far as defense, and that was not a good thing. We saw the same thing kind of like after 9/11, where our Republican president was spending way too much money in defense spending to private companies. There are plenty of movies out there about it. I cannot remember the name of one of them that was recently released. It had Jonah Hill and some other guy in it. And they were, I think it was War Dogs or something like that. Check it out. Pretty good movie. Now, also during this time, we have 2 states that actually go from territory to officially becoming states. First one is going to be Alaska. And that happens in January 1959. That is good old 49. And then 50, we finally get August 21st, 1959. That becomes the last 2 states that we currently have in the United States. So let's talk about the baby boom. The baby boom, as we've already just talked about in the previous lesson, was a dramatic increase in which we see babies being born. And there were a lot of reasons for this. Americans come home, they've got lots of money, they're willing to go ahead and invest and have kids. That did not occur during the Great Depression when they did not have money. And as you can see here, the numbers during 1931 and 1935 are very low. Overall, by 1957, you're going to see 1 baby born every 7 seconds. That is probably not close to where we're at today, but you have to take in consideration that we probably have 2 times the amount of the population in which they had back then. Well, actually, 3 times. Now, all these babies being born, they need somewhere to live. And this is where the suburbans are actually going to come in and be a major factor. And so, a group of young men, led by a father, decided that they were going to start their construction company and build these houses. Now, if you look closely, these houses all look very similar. And the reason they look very similar is because it was easier to mass produce, easier to build. The Levitt family, led by William Levitt, is producing around 150 houses a week. And you're going to see a bunch of other construction companies doing the same thing. And for a flat rate of around $8,000, you can get you a new house. That's a pretty good deal.